Well, let me start off by Stump the Chumps? See if you can tell me when this was written and maybe who.
Okay.
But it's going to sound very familiar here. The farmers of the country do not want to undertake to make over the banking laws. But unless those in control of our monetary system rouse themselves concertedly to the realization that they cannot constantly go on loading the expenses of their mistakes and losses from bad investments on the backs of those least able to bear it, then it's not difficult to foresee the day when farmers will, through cooperative efforts and perhaps under a different monetary system, handle more of their own banking affairs, even down to maintaining checking accounts at their own cooperative institutions. Now, when do you think that was written? Was it yesterday?
I'm guessing it was.
Judging by the age of that book,
I'm guessing it was before yesterday. 1930.
Not a bad guess. It was.
I'm gonna guess. All the discussion of the monetary system makes me think populism, and so I'm gonna guess 1890s.
I was going with the
This
Great
was
Depression.
published. It was probably written in 1937. It was published in 1938. Now, who do you think? Whose are these words? I'll tell you, it's a Vermonter.
Oh, could it be not George Aiken?
It is George Aiken.
All right.
Wow.
And it's his book, Speaking from Vermont, where he talks about his strong commitment to co-ops.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time in the 30s, there were farmer co-ops, there were insurance co-ops, there was maple syrup co-ops, there were a lot of co-ops. The rural electrification program started there. George Aiken had a lot to do with it. He was a very, very strong advocate for cooperatives. And that was one of the first really early movements of co-ops in Vermont. Let me read another piece here that he talks about, which is often forgotten about by co-ops today. He talks about 5 major things that are important for co-ops to do. And he says, lastly, cooperative leadership, farm leadership or the leadership of any movement for that matter, must not lose its touch with the people. Policy and direction must spring from suggestions within the ranks, and offices rotated frequently enough to keep the cooperative spirit alive. That feeling of all the members belonging to the project. Oftentimes, the best organizers and the staunchest supporters of an organization are those persons who've never before had authority invested in them. When official duties are continually laid upon the same few, they are likely to lose the feeling of responsibility which their duties entail. This idea of co-ops staying in touch with their members is so important. And I think some types of co-ops it's easier to do and others, like food co-ops, I think it's a little bit easier to do than credit unions and utility co-ops. But while we're still talking about history, so the 30s, that's when the Hanover co-op started. That's when the Putney co-op started. Those are they went back to the times of when people were really struggling, and they came together under those circumstances. In the 60s and the 70s, there was a renaissance of co-ops. And in Vermont, part of that renaissance happened from the Free Vermont movement. I'm going to just show some visuals of that time. So this is one of the posters that came out of the Free Vermont movement. And this was really a bunch of communes around the state that were gathering together and trying to think about what they could do. And on the back side of this is sort of their overall mission. Let me just read one little piece of this. When we speak of Free Vermont, we speak of the spirit of people yearning to create a society which responds to each of our needs. It grows from very simple needs. The needs for a loving community, for wholesome food, for decent free medical care, for adequate housing, for meaningful work, for time to understand our children and ourselves, and for the right to choose and change. So out of this movement came a lot of different things. Here's another poster of that time. I don't know how well you can see that. It's Vermont Free Territory, don't tread on me. But that movement, they focused on three areas. They started the food buying clubs, which then led to the co-ops all over the state, including Onion River Co-op. They started the People's Free Clinic in Burlington, which is now the Community Health Center, and it's the basis for health centers all across the country. And they also started the Vermont Freeman newspaper, which didn't last very long, but it was sort of the parent of the Vanguard Press, and ultimately 7 Days. So that's a little bit of the past history in Vermont.